What's up guys, my name is Ace, and it's Christmas time, and therefore a ton of people have just got Black Ops 4 for Christmas. So today I wanted to share my top 10 beginner tips for multiplayer with this game. These tips are really designed for people that are just getting into the game, but they could also be a great refresher for people that have been playing the game for a while. Just keep in mind throughout this video there aren't going to be any super advanced tips. So let's hop right into it. Keep in mind these are in no particular order. The first tip that I wanted to give you guys, and this one's quite important, especially for the people that are used to previous Call of Duty games and are just getting into Black Ops 4 for the first time. This has to do with the longer time to kill. In Black Ops 4, it's generally going to take you 1 to 2 extra bullets compared to previous Call of Duty games, or in the case of SMGs, when you start stretching the ranges out, this will actually take you 3 or 4 extra bullets. One of the biggest tips I can give you to compensate for this increase to the time to kill is always keep a teammate nearby. At least at the beginning when you're trying to get a feel for the game, it's always really helpful to have somebody with you. Now this doesn't mean that you should always be standing right next to a teammate and bumping into him all the time. Just make sure you keep somebody that's nearby so if you get into a gunfight, he's going to be right there to help you out. And with this game, you don't really have to worry about teammates stealing your kills because you share kills in this. Even if you get an assist, it will count as an EKIA, which will give you the same amount of score towards your score streaks, and it will also count towards your total kills on the scoreboard. This is something that will generally allow you to stay alive a lot longer and really get a feel for the game. Of course, once you start to get a bit more confident and better at the game, you can start to branch away from your teammates a little bit, but even then, it's usually a good idea to keep a teammate somewhere around, and that way if you need to back out of a situation, you've got a teammate to help you. This brings us to the next tip, and this one's related to creating your classes. This is the gear I would recommend for beginner players. I see a lot of beginner players gravitating towards body armor in the game, and I can kind of understand this. They want that little bit of a leg up in their gunfight to give them a better chance of winning against a more experienced player. While this isn't necessarily a terrible choice, and if you really do struggle to win any gunfights at all, body armor probably is going to be your best bet until you get a better feel for the game. However, I did want to let you guys know, if you didn't know this already, body armor will only ever help you in one gunfight per life. Once that body armor is gone, it's gone for life. It doesn't replenish, you don't get it again until you respawn. Whereas all of the other pieces of gear, they will be helping you several times per life. So therefore, like I said, if you're really struggling just to win that first gunfight in the first place, then sure, body armor is a great choice. But I would highly encourage you guys to try and get away from body armor and towards something like stim shot, which will help you get back in the fight faster so you can be a bit more aggressive if you're feeling confident enough to be more aggressive. Or acoustic sensor, which will give you better situational awareness because it'll show you the direction that enemies will be approaching from on the mini-map. Now keep in mind the counter to that is going to be dead silence, so it's not a perfect solution, but for somebody that's just getting into the game, I feel acoustic sensor is much better at helping you learn the maps and understand enemy flow than something like body armor. This brings us to the next tip for Black Ops 4 that also relates to creating your classes. And this is, generally speaking, attachments are much more powerful than perks in this game. Don't feel obligated to use at least 3 perks. Like a lot of people I see, they think they need to use a perk 1, perk 2, and perk 3. Many of my classes in this game are going to just have 2 perks on it, or sometimes even only 1 perk. And instead, I tend to use my class points on attachments for my gun. Generally speaking, attachments are designed more for helping you directly win gunfights, whereas perks are things that are on the side that are going to prevent you from dying in certain very specific situations. And I tend to feel that it's more important to be winning those gunfights more effectively, especially if you're a beginner player that's struggling to win those gunfights in the first place. So don't be afraid to run only 1 or 2 perks on your class if that means you can add a few extra attachments. Next up, getting into a specific perk that I would recommend that you use if you're a somewhat aggressive player. If you ever get caught sprinting by enemies, this is Gung Ho. Gung Ho is a perk that is on literally every single one of my classes. It is my crutch perk, and I absolutely hate playing without it. I feel like I'm being held back if I'm not using it. What this perk allows you to do, if you haven't found out already, is it allows you to come out of sprint faster and shoot your enemy. In a game where milliseconds count, this makes a huge difference. If you run into a guy and you're both sprinting at each other and you see each other at the same time, the person with Gung Ho will win that gunfight more often than not. In addition to this, a little tip with Gung Ho, and this is something that might be a bug, but it's something that you can definitely take advantage of with Gung Ho. People do it all the time. When you're sprinting, assuming you're using this perk, and you run into an enemy, the first thing you should do is aim down sight and then start firing, or at least start to aim down sight and then you can start firing your gun. If you hit the aim down sight button first as you're coming out of sprint, this will allow you to literally fire your gun immediately. Whereas if you don't do this and you hit the fire button first, there will be a delay where your gun won't fire for a certain amount of time. Like I said, in this game, milliseconds count, and this absolutely makes a difference between life and death in a lot of situations for me. Now, the next tip that I have for you is another perk-related tip, but this one is kind of the polar opposite. This is a perk I would say you're basically wasting a point on. This is the Ghost perk. Now, Ghost in previous Call of Duty games is a very powerful perk. It's often a go-to, especially for beginner players or people that just like playing stealthy. In Black Ops 4, though, the Ghost perk is pretty much useless. It literally only activates when you're at a full sprint, and the moment you come out of sprint, it deactivates again. When you think about all the times you have to stop to reload, or you just want to take a second to pre-aim a corner or something, in all of those brief moments, the Ghost perk isn't working, so it's as if you don't have the Ghost perk on at all. This is by far the worst Ghost perk we have ever seen in a Call of Duty game, and at least in its current state, I would say you're much better off spending that class point on an attachment for your gun, or possibly a different perk. Now, getting away from the class creation and to the next tip, this is one that may seem really obvious even to some of the beginner players out there, but I do have to say it because I'm still seeing some Christmas noobs forget about this. Don't forget to heal. In this game, you do have to manually heal yourself, and therefore, after you take damage, in a lot of situations, you gotta back off a little bit and heal yourself up. Now, if you're getting really annoyed with this healing and you feel like you have to do it all the time and you're always waiting for that health bar to replenish so you can heal yourself again, Stim Shot is probably going to be your answer for this. Stim Shot makes healing a lot easier. You're also able to hip fire your gun while you're popping your Stim Shot, which is always great. But just in general, don't forget to heal yourself before pushing into the next gunfight. It does take a little bit of time to get used to if you're used to previous Call of Duty games or any first-person shooter where you automatically heal yourself. But if you just start getting into that habit nice and early, then the muscle memory will just kick in and you won't even have to think about healing once you get some practice with it. Moving on to the next tip, this one is a little bit of a general tip, and this applies to pretty much any first-person shooter game, but sometimes it's great to get a reminder, and especially for the beginners out there, always remember to use cover and move from cover to cover. I see far too many beginners running out in the open, right in the middle of nowhere, and they're so easy to pick off all the time. Don't be that guy. Make sure you're putting cover between you and your enemy, and if you are moving from one point to another, make sure it's from one piece of cover to another piece of cover, and know which piece of cover you're going to be moving towards before you make your move. This is a super basic tip, but oftentimes if you forget these basics, you're going to be getting yourself killed a lot more often than you should be. Getting into the next tip I have for you, this is play around with the sensitivity values until you find the one that's perfect for you. Now, I have done an entire video talking in great detail about the sensitivity values and how to find the perfect sensitivity for you. I will leave that link down below. I highly encourage you to try that because once you find that perfect sensitivity, you're going to find that you're able to hit shots a lot more effectively, and therefore you'll win gunfights a lot more effectively, which is extremely important. Moving on to tip number 9, this is use a launcher on your class if you can pull it off. Like if you have that extra class point, always put a launcher as your secondary, because the launcher can be very helpful to your team. Even if you're struggling to win your gunfights and you're not really able to contribute a lot to the team when it comes to winning those gunfights and capturing objectives, for instance, it can be so helpful to have somebody on the team pulling out a launcher and shooting down UAVs or counter UAVs or any sort of streaks. Or if you see razor wire, it's super easy to take that out. It takes just one launcher shot to take out razor wire or Torque's barricade. If you see that, a launcher is really effective at taking those out. You can be a great asset to your team just by having that launcher on your class and pulling it out anytime there's something that needs to be destroyed. Not only does this help the team, this will also help you out because you get score every time you destroy something like this, and it's super easy to do. It's not like the UAV is going to be shooting back at you. You can easily just pick it out of the sky and get free score. And with that leaves us with just one more tip for this video, and this is a very general tip, but this is probably the most important tip I can give you. Always try to learn from your mistakes. This applies to so many things, from sports to just general things in your life, but it also applies to video games, and people seem to forget this. Anytime you die in this game, think about the situation. Think about what went wrong and what you could have done better. Was your aim off? Were you in a bad position? Were you not using cover? What was the enemy doing that allowed him to get the advantage over you in that gunfight? Was he doing something that you can learn from? Always look for a lesson that can be learned from situations that don't go your way. Try to avoid immediately jumping on the, oh, that was lag, or, oh, that guy's cheating, or something like that. Try to avoid that, because if you fall into that trap of just blaming situations on something that's out of your control all the time, then you'll never really improve, because in your mind at that point, you never do anything wrong, and therefore you don't need to change anything. Always learn from mistakes, look for improvement, and actively work on that as well. This is something that goes beyond just beginner play as well. This can go for intermediate or even advanced players as well. If you're trying to push yourself to that next level, try to figure out what mistakes you tend to be making and then work on a plan to make fewer of those mistakes. Even for me right now, my biggest mistake that I make is I get too aggressive. I push into situations that I know I probably am not going to win, but I feel like it needs to be done because I'm always trying to get as many kills as possible and push in and get the map control and everything like that. And it screws me over quite a bit. So no matter what your skill level is, always try to acknowledge your mistakes and look for ways to improve. And with that, we're going to wrap up today's video on the top 10 ways to improve at Black Ops 4 multiplayer. Of course, I'd like to know in the comment section below, for those of you guys that aren't beginners that stuck through this whole video, what other tips did you add for the beginner players out there? Also, I thought it would be a great idea, since this is a video targeted at beginners and people that are just getting the game, if you're looking for some friends to play with, feel free to use the comment section below as a place to leave your PSN or your Xbox ID or your Blizzard.net name or whatever it might be. Just feel free to use the comment section to post down below if you're looking for other people to play with. Maybe you can go and link up with some people and have a more enjoyable experience with like-minded players. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.